After the absolute colossal gombings of Fianna Fail led us over the ledge, only one political party were ready to step up and take the mantle. Only one party dared to take the hard decisions. Only one party were brave enough to oversee the total corporate sell-off of the entire country like a modern-day Raj administrating rule here on behalf of the vulture capitalists and cuckoo funds. These blue-shirted modern heroes were the only ones with an ideology so ready-made and extreme that recognised that yes, there was a normal people in the streets, at least the ones that hadn't been forced to emigrate yet. Yes, they, and not the banks, had to pay for the rampant recklessness of the financial system and implement perpetual austerity, take the brave decisions to dismantle our public services, watch a healthcare system fall into ruin, sell off all our state assets and basically anything that wasn't nailed down. And actually, in second thoughts, everything that was nailed down too.
So pure pockets.
Sell it all to the very same investors and speculators that caused the crash in the first place. Thing is, unlike the constant narrative that's wheeled out that Fine Gael were forced to make the hard choices, the truth is, the policies they implemented in Ireland that caused so much suffering, that seen catastrophic societal breakdown, mass immigration, and the unprecedented transfer of wealth to the rich, is actually what they represent. It is their ideology. It always has been. Fine Gael and Fianna Fail are the crisis. People reared in workhouses, as you are aware, are no great acquisition to the community, and they have no idea whatsoever of civic responsibilities. As a rule, their highest aim is to live at the expense of the ratepayers. Consequently, it would be a decided gain if they got it into their heads to immigrate. William T. Cosgrave, first Taoiseach of the Free State and Fine Gael icon. Often in Ireland, politics feels like it's removed from the rest of the world. The media especially likes to treat the centrism of Fine Gael and Fianna Fail as a natural order and adopts a dismissive attitude to any other analysis of society that's outside the narrow confines presented by the establishment. Of course, that's because since the formation of the Free State, the same establishment has been in place to defend their interests and that of capital. The same strata of a society dominated by the professional classes, including the media. The old Ireland that remedied any radical thought with a hurley around the feet and then the head, right back into the obedient embrace of a Catholic theocracy. The same joyless, sexually repressed sadists that dictated this authority represented by the church and class were to be respected and feared, and which stifled and suffocated generations of Irish people. A place where social mobility was non-existent. Any hope to fulfill yourself intellectually, sexually, or creatively, or in many cases just to survive if enough to eat, you were expected to leave. And millions did. One of the first acts of the first finance minister of the new Irish Free State, Ernest Blythe, after the end of the Civil War in 1923, was to cut the old age pension by $1. The defeat of the Republican forces, containing the bulk of those radicals and socialists who had fought in 1916 and the War for Independence, left the stage open for what can only be described as the counter-revolution. The victors in that civil war, the pro-treaty Free State government, was made up of businessmen, professionals and the middle-class conservatives, and ensured the perpetuation of the highly centralised state administrative system which closed off access to power to the broad mass of ordinary people. The professional classes, property owners, capitalists, industrialists and bankers still had that access and influence that went with it. So too had the Roman Catholic hierarchy. There was even enough time when, fearing their dominance on power and capital being threatened by Fianna Fail entering the Dáil, the new Irish Free State establishment, supported and fostered actual goose-stepping Nazi-saluting fascists. Onal Duffy was the Blue Shirts leader and the first leader of Fine Gael, something they seem reluctant to acknowledge. Go on their website and marvel as they don't even mention it at all. Thankfully for fans of subjugation, rather than being a socialist threat that would shake up the status quo, De Valera and Fianna Fail rapidly proved to be nothing of the sort, winning power in 1932, and with that the establishment of today was set in place. 100 years of it. This is all completely normal. And the thing is, they wouldn't mind a ghoulish dystopia because, as a lot of us suspect, some people are getting really bloody rich. We joined the EU in 1973 and adopted an economic approach reliant on foreign direct investment. The Maastricht Treaty was signed in 1992, and to join the euro in a single market, the eurozone periphery was expected to liberalise and deregulate its banking sector. Low interest rates and intense competition between the newly entered European banks and domestic Irish banks drove an unprecedented property bubble, one of the largest asset price bubbles in the history of the world. The Irish economy had transformed into one almost entirely reliant on credit, domestic demand and not much else, but it was cheered on by the establishment, their cohorts in the media, the developers and the landowners. The Irish wealthy connected class borrowed billions in a frenzy as Fianna Fail, the dopes, continuously poured petrol onto the fire by adding even more tax incentives for property investment. Bertie Ahern even said people should go kill themselves if they questioned it. The Celtic Tiger was the darling of the economic world, the perfect neoliberal model for small countries to follow. Then the bubble burst. The debt owed was 5 times more than the entire economy was worth. Every bank that operated in the state had loaned large sums of money, a lot to developers, secured on land, and were essentially bankrupt. It was the establishment's reaction to this event, starting with the 2008 bank guarantee, NAMA, and the Troika bailouts that showed exactly who owns the Irish state, who does it value, and whose interest does it serve. This bank bailout is a simple transfer from taxpayers to bondholders, and it will saddle generations to come. The only thing that might give you solace is that, as chief economist of the World Bank, we see this type of thing happening in banana republics all over the world. Whenever a banking crisis happens, the financial sector uses the turmoil as a mechanism to transfer wealth from the general populations to themselves. I've been very disappointed to see that this has happened not only in banana republics, but in advanced, industrialised countries. Stiegelt in 2012. For the last decade, Ireland went through something described by author and journalist Naomi Klein as the shock doctrine, also known as crisis capitalism, and it's only through a major crisis manufactured as part of a deliberate policy framed by corporations and trust funds with influence in government would the type of society we see today in Ireland be able to be imposed. The short-term profits offered by purely speculative investment has turned the stock, currency and real estate markets into crisis creation machines. And when the dust settles, that leaves states stripped of all its assets, their people much worse off, but the architects of the crisis end up as the beneficiaries. And Ireland was no different. The entire story is extremely murky. I mean, we went from the reckless lending of global banks along with unregulated speculation almost brought down the world economy to, actually, we've decided that the banks and private investment funds that created the crisis aren't actually going to pay. In fact, hey Ireland, we're going to make it sovereign debt now, so the Irish people are going to pay. In fact, you're going to pay 42% of the entire European banking debt. And now since we've instantly bankrupted your state, you're broke, so you're going to have to pay for it by taking this massive 64 billion unpayable loan with interest that you'll barely be able to service, saving even unsecured bondholders while selling off all your public and state assets to the same speculative girls that caused the crisis. And since you're so damn reckless, you'll submit to a programme of supervision, meaning that the ECB will gain leverage over the Irish government in order to seek specific changes to the way Ireland was being governed. It's called a bailout, and you have to accept, or else a bomb goes off in Dublin. But that's not fair, said some of us, while the rest figured out what class of scam government bond spread yields, credit default swaps, and memorandum of understandings were.
The institution I'm talking about is defunct. It's over, it's finished. Now, why are the Irish people required, under threat from the ECB, why are the Irish people required to pay billions to unguaranteed bondholders under threat to the ECB? You didn't answer the question the last time, so maybe you'd answer it this time.
Well, I think he doesn't have anything to add to what he's already said.
Just a minute. This isn't good. This isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. You people are intervening in this society, causing huge damage by requiring us to make payments not for the benefit of anybody in Ireland, but for the benefit of European financial institutions. Now, could you explain why the Irish people are inflicted with this burden?
Well, I think I have this question.
You've nothing to say. There's no answer. Is that right?
We all partied, said Fine Gael and Fianna Fail in unison, while serving us up on a platter to international capital. Ireland's wealth was the sustenance they need to fill the dark, empty, cavernous void of greed at the heart of the system. But that hunger is never satiated, So all the landed property and distressed mortgages we acquired through NAMA to bail out the property developers and Anglo, we're going to sell those for buttons to vulture funds to make the lives of families in negative equity hell. The recapitalised banks, flush with all your money, will now get busy screwing over more Irish families with tracker mortgages overcharging billions, while handing out pamphlets on the most effective forms of suicide after being made homeless in a ditch. And just in case you were wondering, apart from the people of Ireland, none of them are ever actually going to pay taxes ever again. Not the banks, not the vulture funds, or Apple, or Facebook, or any multinational corporation. In fact, we're going to pay millions in their legal defence to not pay billions of tax owed to us, because we've also decided that Ireland's only future and purpose is to be a corporate profit-funneling banana republic, facilitating the richest people in the world to hoard their wealth in tax havens while the citizens live under perpetual austerity. This is all completely normal. If you think about it, in normal circumstances, would Irish people vote for a completely failing health system? One of the worst in the developed world. It's so bad that A&E are overflowing, people are dying on waiting lists, corpses rotting in the corridors. Yep, say that again, corpses rotting in the corridors, which incidentally Fine Gael, with their customary empathy, claimed there was no evidence of, even as hospital staff mopped bodily fluids and tried to console distraught relatives. Of course they wouldn't vote for this. But if people have means, they're forced to pay for private insurance because, well, they want not to die. And so it's normalised that access to healthcare is dependent on wealth. And of course, private corporations are there to provide it at a tidy profit while subsidised by the Irish state or given public land for free. There's a reason why global investors have entered the Irish primary care market, because it offers relatively high profit opportunities. And fuck anybody who can't afford it. Because poverty is a moral failing, and if only they got up early in the morning, they too could be living the Irish dream. It would be a decided gain if they got it into their heads to immigrate. Do you think Irish people would vote for a party that said, we definitely need more homeless people on their posters? Or even, let's make it impossible for people to ever afford to buy a house or have a place to live that, in exchange for all your money, you can microwave baked beans directly from your bed that's also your kitchen? No, but that's exactly what results from their policies, because no matter what you're constantly told about the left, it's Fine Gael that are the extremists. Oh, and guess what Fianna Fail's solution to the housing crisis is? They call it a first-time buyer's incentive, but it's really just a subsidy for private developers after everything they're responsible for. Driving up the property prices again while their developer friends get a tasty profit. The same policies as before the crash. Most of them are landlords, greedy and stupid Gambian men. Nowadays, Housing Minister Eoin Murphy, a man so out of his depth that just his picture on Wikipedia is enough to explain the entry on class privilege, is a living embodiment of the corrupt ruling class the British and the Free State has foisted on us generation after generation. He represents Dublin Bay South, the former constituency of beady-eyed arch-anti-Republican Michael McDowell, by the way. His grandfather, an accountant, famously swindled millions off the rich and famous of the Irish media and art world. His father, barrister, senior counsel, and, I shit you not, erotic fiction author, made millions during the Mahon Tribunal, and in doing so, actually shows its findings of how corruption is so entrenched in Irish elites' way of doing business. It is the Irish elites' way of doing business. So, what could possibly be the reason Eoin Murphy, born into the Irish elite, will not build social housings to alleviate the housing and homeless crisis? It couldn't possibly be to defend its class interest and the profits of the private landlords, the hoarding landowners, while the inflated price of property now means it's even more lucrative for vulture funds to repossess people's homes. This is the Fine Gael property investor cabal. You know, the club that you're not in. These vulture funds didn't buy all that land, private property and stress mortgages that knocked down prices from NAMA to not profit massively. These people don't give a damn that it leads to young people finding it impossible to find somewhere to live, people driven to suicide from stress, or families being evicted with nowhere to go, which is exactly the same policy the British carried out and enforced with RIC thugs in the 19th century. But however callous Fine Gael really are, even they wouldn't try to commemorate the tools of their own subjugation like the RIC and the Black and Tans.
The Minister for Justice, Charlie Flanagan, is here in studio. Minister, thanks for coming into us. Now, 24 hours ago you were speaking to us and you were defending your decision to press ahead at that stage with a state commemoration for the RIC and the Dublin Metropolitan Police. Now it's been deferred. Why did you change your mind?
Tomás McCurtain, the Lord Mayor of Cork, was dragged out of his bed and shot in front of his wife and son by RIC officers.
We can't not acknowledge those atrocities, and particularly because it was a guerrilla warfare, most of the atrocities and the reprisals were on communities, were on women, children and families.
Alright, but it's not like they're bulldozing homeless people off the streets. Still groggy from the shock, the Irish people are suddenly beginning to ask questions. That the inequality and injustice, that isn't just natural state of society and just the way things are. We're beginning to get angry at those in service to elites in the financial industry, at all our expense. We've seen in recent years a growing resistance like the hugely successful grassroots campaign against water privatisation and the raise the roof housing protests. I mean, we have alternatives, and thankfully the media in Ireland will give a voice to these concerns and alternatives to the government. Oh, which unfortunately means I have to talk about the role of the Irish media in modern Ireland. Political journalism in Ireland on the whole exists to maintain the status quo. There's a huge problem with the private concentrated media ownership in general. If the role of the media is to be a vital watchdog, speak truth to power, and it's vital to a healthy dynamic democracy, let's have a quick horrified look at the rotten putrid corpse of the media here. The private media we can sum up like this: cosy relationship between redacted and the government, leading to a reduction in scrutiny and undermining of the ability of the media to hold the powerful to account, and the ability of redacted to dominate Irish media and have a substantial influence on the news agendas and the content received by audiences. For those of you not aware, the independent news and media controls much of the daily and Sunday newspaper market, along with the private broadcast media, and the majority shareholder is the one and only Dennis Redacted O'Brien. According to a 2016 report by Reporters Without Borders into the concentration of Irish media, they stated, democracy would be threatened if a single voice within the media, if the power to propagate a single viewpoint were to become too dominant. Ireland has one of the most concentrated media markets of any democracy. Accumulation of what has been described as communicative power within the news markets is at endemic levels, and this, combined with the dominance of one private individual media owner in the state, creates what the Media Reform Coalition has described as conditions in which wealthy individuals and organisations can amass huge political and economic power and distort the media landscape to suit their interests and personal views. There will be extreme election interference during the election debate, and it won't come from the Russian bots or Shinner bots, no matter what convicted liars like Sarah Carey summon from the nightmares of her dark overlord to spew all over the pages of The Independent. To paraphrase actual journalist Caitlin Johnson, the interference will come from the billionaire class and its political media lackeys, and it will be perfectly legal. On all the traditional media outlets, the narrative is the people's choice is Fine Gael and Fianna Fail. We will have lively debates with panel stuff of establishment figures that will frame it this way over and over and over again. With this media landscape and most people too busy trying to pay rent, in debt, working long hours, commuting in traffic jams, or in terrible public transport thinking of how to afford the unaffordable childcare that after forced privatisation is totally unviable both to parents and providers, it's a low-key drudgery that forces most of the population to disengage from politics and accept everything is inevitable. That's the best we can do. You know, you've heard it at work or in bars. Politicians, they're all the same. Something's nagging at the back of the Irish psyche though, and it's beginning to manifest even as we're told that the recovery is complete, the economy is strong, and everything is fine now. There's signs that Irish people are angrier, that no matter the amount of times that RTE claims that Gerry Adams was in the IRA, the IFA, or the ESB, it's beginning to sound desperate, so transparent that it's having the opposite effect. Maybe Ireland, one of the only 3 other European countries that's never had a left government, are finally pissed off enough to begin to realise it doesn't have to be like this. Anyway, the highlight of the election was the leaders' debate that kicked off the election campaign that spectacularly backfired, so much so that noted revolutionary and human 2x4 Pat Kenny remarked halfway through it, "You're both kind of in agreement here," summing up the history of politics in the Free State and the Irish Republic for the last 100 years. But although it's 2020 and not 1936, a time when the Catholic Church were waving blue shirts off to fight for fascism in Spain and ghostwriting the constitution with De Valera through the medium of fear, cruelty and guilt, it's obvious the only difference between the two parties is the different ways they attack Sinn Féin. Micheál Martin, the Fianna Fail leader, is a man with all the gravitas of a wet sock and the charisma of several more wet socks stuffed into a cheap polyester suit. Actually found himself arguing at one point that he was less of a total disaster as health minister than his opponent Leo Varadkar, who, fresh from being called a Tory boy and reincarnation of Thatcher by a member of the public, which by his usual standards of human interaction is a roaring success, seemed to be on a one-man charm retreat. He had the presence of a man who had just been told that there's an election, and well, somebody's got to have to explain the last 9 years to the people. So uninspiring was this exchange that the only entertainment for the viewing audience was to cringe at the screen as Varadkar visibly strained to express basic human empathy. Surprising that he risked it though, since the only recognisable human characteristic he's shown before is a smug disdain for the poor and novelty socks in place of a personality. Both politicians were so thoroughly out of touch and unconvincing, I got the feeling that a lot of people watching, not in a dissimilar way to the fall of communism when people decided they just didn't believe in the system anymore, people in countries all over Ireland were having a similar epiphany. 2 soulless, grey, opportunistic, empty suits with several fat state pensions with no vision for the future, or even worse, the exact same miserable vision for the future, that they don't actually have any intention of making us a real functioning country, or address any of the issues affecting people, which pisses me right off because we can't truly enjoy laughing at everybody else falling into proto-fascist dystopias. The beige, empty, waffling, mundane horror of the nature of our rulers, just placeholders for the status quo. The second leaders' debate with the rest of the party leaders, and it didn't get any better for our boys, as the studio audience resembled an assembly of the Russian factory and mill workers in pre-revolutionary Russia, repeatedly bursting into rapturous applause every time Richard Boyd Bart said anything.
If you want to solve the housing crisis, you don't do as both Fianna Fail and the Greens and then Fine Gael Labour did under NAMA, is sell off 40 billion or more worth of land and property assets to property speculators and vulture funds. Okay, that's the first thing you don't do.
Between which Mary Lou eviscerated them, showing the ruthless efficiency of Dennis O'Brien's lawyers trying to sue somebody for libel.
To these men, you'd never imagine that one had crashed the economy and that the other is so fiscally responsible that he's producing the most expensive hospital in the world. So,
Varadkar, often a man with a whiff of sarcasm about him, by the end had the energy of a corpse doused in acid and dumped into a mineshaft, whereas Micheál Martin, like an unstable, tightly wound ball of spite, the constant attacks at the Sinn Féin leader just give the impression of him petty and disingenuous, the human equivalent of a cantankerous watery cup of tea, whose leadership is as convincing as a limp handshake, and with a total lack of substance only rivaled by the word Republican in Fianna Fail, the Republican Party. The same is happening all over the Western world, but since Irish media's coverage of international affairs amounts to a cut and paste from ex-CIA political analysts, or outlets like Reuters, who helpfully admitted recently that they've been funded by the British MOD, people that feel resentment and anger are looking for answers, but they find it difficult to contextualise the way globalisation has affected populations everywhere. So I'll just summarise. What Fine Gael and Fianna Fail represent is the last gasp of a corrupt, failing order. They are our own local face of a decaying global system that's based on infinite resources on a finite planet, a massive debt crisis with gross inequality so extreme that 26 individuals own more wealth than almost 4 billion people. A system in order to survive condemns the vast majority of humans to perpetual poverty due to unsustainable and inequitable consumption. As great as values are consumerism, debt, and isolating people from each other, pointless wage slavery that author David Graeber calls bullshit jobs, millions of people, even the middle classes, toil away in meaningless, unnecessary jobs, and knowing it, create an environment of disastrous mental health issues and a lack of meaning and connection in people's lives, just cured by prescriptions of opioids and Prozac in the West, And for the rest of humanity, the rosy prospect of toiling away their horrible brief existence in mines, struggling to breathe while scraping out cobalt with their bare hands to feed the corporate green revolution need for batteries. It's a system that actively destroys our own habitat. Maybe a total eco-collapse, and quite possibly leads to our own extinction as a species. Wasn't the free market supposed to eliminate inefficient, unnecessary jobs? Jobs that if disappeared tomorrow wouldn't even change a thing? Didn't capitalism promise that by now we would be all working less, our basic needs met, instead of manufactured scarcity with shite wages that barely covers the necessities of living? And the super rich haven't seemingly decided that given their infinite possibilities, what they want to do is traffic children? This is a world where obscene wealth hoarding by the rich on the back of the workers is called a virtue. That wealth probably hidden on a Caribbean island cleared of pesky native pickaninnies 100 years ago by the British Empire, but today has a GDP of the American arms industry. Yet the only thing there is thousands of shiny PO boxes for shell companies that contain papers that simply read, "The bearer is entitled to the entire f***ing resources of the planet." A world where entertainment on a Saturday night amounts to guessing when exactly Israel or Trump's violent neuroses finally snaps, and the world comes to a nuclear end over perpetual war for control of resources that's not only normal but vital. To protect their monopoly on the distribution of energy and service the world economy, a dogmatic belief in a system of economics, although so completely, demonstrably disastrous, but continues to exist because our own collective delusion that rivals the Catholic Church telling us that, no, in fact that cracker stuck in the roof of your mouth has undergone transubstantiation, and yeah, you're literally cannibalizing the flesh of a 2,000-year-old dead Palestinian, and this is all completely normal. The manufactured consent served up by shady establishment organs like the Institute of Statecraft, the Integrity Initiative, and News Talk Lunchtime with Ciara Kelly spew establishment narratives peddled by the media and designed to fit whatever online information bubble we're trapped in by Google and Facebook. It's a powerful force, but increasingly even that isn't enough to sustain the mental gymnastics required to miss the colossal failure of neoliberal economics and the establishment in Ireland that have forced it. Because, as we've seen, the Irish establishment only cares about themselves, and they're masters in the finance industry. They pump billions into banks and allow the vulture funds to make billions in profits, while they hover over working families. They force tens of thousands of people to emigrate, while multinational corporations pay not a cent in tax. The endless scandals of Fine Gael in power. Now Fianna Fail think it's their turn again. They will attack anybody who wants to tax banks, build homes, or reduce rents. They'll be called dangerous and extreme, while these parasites continue to get rich. But there's real chance for change here. First time ever maybe, and they're really shitting it this time. So yeah, I think we can do better. We have to. In Ireland it starts by getting rid of both of them. Vote progressive candidates and there's a chance for the biggest shock to hit the Irish establishment since its foundation. Even if, on RTE, the revolution will not be televised. It's only the beginning.